Olá, muito boa tarde. Eu sou Lina Bragança, sou editora da Top Seller, a chancela que lançou, teve o prazer de lançar Um Fogo Lento, novo livro de Paula Hawkins. Nós estamos aqui com a Paula ao vivo hoje, a transmitir em direto na FNAC Online. Obrigada a todos os que estão connosco a assistir. Esta conversa, entrevista, dar-se-á em inglês, naturalmente, e começarei por fazer uma breve introdução, uma breve apresentação do percurso da Paula em termos da obra que concretizou até agora, até chegar a Fogo Lento. Muito obrigada, então. So, Paula Hawkins worked as a journalist for 15 years before turning her hand to fiction. Born and brought up in Zimbabwe, Paula moved to London in 1989 and has lived there ever since. Her first thriller, The Girl on the Train, has been a global phenomenon, selling 23 million copies worldwide. Published in over 40 languages, it has been a #1 bestseller around the world and was a #1 box office hit film starring Emily Blunt. Into the Water, Paula's second standalone thriller, has also been a global #1 bestseller, spending 20 weeks in the Sunday Times hardback fiction top 10 bestseller list and 6 weeks at #1. Today, 11 days after its release, we have Paula with us to talk about her most recent thriller. A Slow Fire Burning tells the story of a young man who is found murdered in a London houseboat, which triggers questions about 3 women who knew him. It is already the #1 best-selling title in the US and the UK this week, and has been the #1 best-selling title in all major bookshops in Portugal for the past week as well. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Paula.
It's great to talk to you. I'm happy to be here.
I know all our Portuguese readers watching us are absolutely thrilled to be meeting you again. It's been a while, ever since 2017, when we released Into the Water in Portuguese. So, 4 years have passed since you released Into the Water, and how has the return to the spotlight been for you so far?
Well, I mean, it obviously has felt very different this time because we're doing this on Zoom instead of me being there with you, which will obviously be a lot more fun. But it's great. It's great to have a novel out. It's been a bit of a long stretch this time. I'm very excited about this book. I'm very excited about how readers are going to respond to it. So yeah, it's a really nice feeling.
I was wondering because we haven't talked for a while, and in the meantime, a pandemic happened. How did that impact your writing process of this novel in particular?
Well, I think I was fortunate in that I was quite a long way into the novel by the time the pandemic actually started. I knew what I was going to write about. I knew who my characters were. I sort of had I had most of the storyline. I'd written a draft. So once everything got shut down, I didn't have to try and come up with a new story. I think that would have been very difficult. All I had to do was focus on the work I was already working on. So actually it was quite, in a strange sort of way, quite useful for me, because it just meant I had no distractions. I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't go anywhere, just completely focused on that one thing. So it was very productive for me, work-wise, the pandemic, weirdly.
Good. I have to say that I absolutely loved the book. I told you earlier. I tend to think that your work is all about people. It's what has always drawn me into your stories, the way people are, their qualities and their frailties, and how they got to be that way. All of your characters in A Slow Fire Burning are struggling to some extent, and it is that struggle and the history that made them who they are today that binds the novel together. It is the way you intertwine their stories around the murder and how you manage to build a plot that holds them together while adding the element of suspense and mystery that turns it into a thriller. Because otherwise, I would say that you are essentially an amazing reader and explorer of the human being. It's what I feel. So how would you describe A Slow Fire Burning to your readers? Is it a thriller? Is it a novel about people?
I mean, yeah, it is a thriller. At its heart, there is a murder mystery that has to be solved. There is a body, and we want to find out what happened to this body. But it is actually it's kind of strangely for a crime novel. It's sort of also a book about love and about the loss of love and what that does to you, how having a tragedy in your life can alter its course, and how you might respond to that. So there are all of the characters in this novel, as you said, have had something fairly terrible happen to them in their past, an accident or a tragedy of some sort. And we see them years later as they're still sort of grappling with the aftermath of those tragedies. And to a large degree, as I say, it's about losing somebody or losing some part of yourself, and how that shapes how you navigate the world. But also, running through this is the fact that somebody has been killed and one of these people is responsible, and we do want to find out. So there's two kind of sides to it, and hopefully it meshes quite well. But I am interested in the characters more than anything else. For me, that's the most important part of the novel.
That's what I feel. What was the first image that came to you that later on became the source of the novel? Did you have one?
Well, there's really two things, because all of my books start with a character, and the character in this case is a young woman called Laura. But a character by herself is not enough. You have to have a story to tell with that character, and the story for me is often suggested by a location or a place. And in this case, that was the Regent's Canal, which runs through the middle of London. It's very close to where I live, which is why it came into my head, because I was sort of wandering around London a lot when I was thinking about this. And there are all these houseboats along the canal. And I'm always fascinated by where people live and why they choose to live in certain places. And to live on a houseboat is quite a strange thing to do. So I was just wondering about the kinds of people who live there and the kinds of lives they might live. And some of those boats are really they look almost abandoned. They're sort of really dirty, and they have filthy windows, and you can't really see inside. And I was wondering, you wonder what might be in there. Could there be something terrible in there?
That wouldn't be Miriam's boat, because she takes a lot of care.
No, Miriam's boat is a nice one, but there's you can see where I get these kind of the images from. Yeah.
So what was your main challenge while writing the book? What would you say?
Well, I think in this novel, what took me a long time was finding the right way to tell the story. I had a bunch of characters. I knew I wanted them to be linked together, but it took me a while to sort of settle their relationships in my head and settle, how they all related to each other, how they should relate to each other. And that was just something that I had to build gradually. So it was just kind of a bit of a slow start. Once I had it, then I knew where I was going, but I didn't have a very clear trajectory from the beginning, as sometimes I do. This one I had to sort of feel my way a bit through the course of the novel.
A slow fire burning, so to speak.
Exactly.
Would you mind reading us an extract of the book, because we love to hear you read?
Okay. Just gonna get the book here. So the bit I'm going to read is it's from the beginning of the novel, and this is Laura. What we're reading is in the Laura section. Inside Laura's head, Deirdre spoke. The trouble with you, Laura, is that you make bad choices. Too fucking right, Deirdre. Not something Laura expected to say or even think, but standing there in her bathroom, shaking uncontrollably, blood pulsing hot and steady from the cut to her arm, she had to admit that imaginary Deirdre was bang on the money. She leaned forward, her forehead resting against the mirror so she wouldn't have to look herself in the eye. Only looking down was worse, because that way she could watch the blood ooze out of her, and it made her woozy, made her feel like she might throw up. So much blood. The cut was deeper than she thought. She ought to go to the hospital. There was no way she was going to the hospital. Bad choices. When at last the flow of blood seemed to slow, Laura took off her t-shirt and dropped it on the floor. She slipped out of her jeans, dropped her knickers, wriggled out of her bra, inhaling sharply through her teeth as the metal catch scraped against the cut. She dropped the bra on the floor too, clambered into the bathtub and turned on the shower. She stood shivering under the paltry trickle of scalding water. She ran the tips of her wrinkled fingers back and forth over her bone white, beautiful scars. Hip, thigh, shoulder, back of skull. Here I am, she said quietly to herself. Here I am. Afterwards, her forearm wrapped ineffectually in reams of toilet paper, the rest of her wrapped in a threadbare towel, sitting on the ugly grey pleather sofa in her living room. Laura rang her mother. It went straight to voicemail and she hung up. No point wasting credit. She rang her father next. You all right, chicken? She could hear noises in the background, the radio, 5 Live. Dad, she felt a lump rise to her throat and she swallowed it. What's up? Dad, could you come round? I had a bad night. I was wondering if you could just come over for a bit. It's a bit of a drive, I know, but no, Philip. Deirdre, hissing in the background through clenched teeth. We've got bridge. Dad, could you take me off speaker? Sweetheart, seriously, could you take me off speaker? I don't want to hear her voice. She makes me want to set fire to things. Now, come on, Laura. Oh, just forget it, Dad. It doesn't matter. Are you sure? No, I'm fucking not. Yes, I'm sure I'm fine. I'm fine. I'll be fine. On her way to the bedroom, she stepped on her jacket. She dropped in the hallway in the rush to get to the bathroom. She bent down and picked it up. The sleeve was torn, Daniel's watch still in the pocket. She took the watch out and turned it over, slipping it onto her wrist. Toilet paper around her forearm bloomed scarlet, her limb throbbing gently as the blood pulsed out of her. Her head swam. In the bathroom, she dropped the watch into the sink, tore off the paper, dropped the towel on the floor, climbed back under the shower. Using a pair of scissors to scrape beneath her fingernails, she watched the water running rosy at her feet. She closed her eyes. She listened to Daniel's voice saying, "What is wrong with you?" And Deirdre's voice, "No, Philip, we've got bridge." And to her own, "Set fire to things, set fire, set fire, set fire."
That's the perfect extract. You're an amazing reader, by the way, of your own novel. I don't know if it's very usual, but you are. It's a good thing that you chose this one, because the next question I had for you is related to the characters. I feel, and I felt it when I read it, that one of the great novelties in A Slow Fire Burning is connected to the introduction of 2 very special characters. Laura, whom we've just met in the extract that you were reading, and Irene. Laura's character is extremely fragile, and I feel that it raises the need for protection from the reader. She's funny but tragic, she's strong and at the same time frail. Irene, on the other hand, is strong despite her age, incredibly amusing, and an older person, which is also a novelty. They are both very different from any other character that you have created in your work so far. How did you come up with them?
Well, Laura was sort of suggested to me by a story I'd heard about from a friend about someone they knew who'd had an accident and had, as a result of this accident, had some behavioural changes. And this is similar to what happened to Laura. So Laura is she's in her 20s, but when she was a child, she was knocked off her bike and she had a head injury, and that's left her with some problems, one of which is this condition called disinhibition, which means that she sort of has no filter, and she can behave inappropriately sometimes. She says things without thinking, and she can be very reckless and impetuous, and she loses her temper. So life is quite difficult for her because she struggles to keep a job or have relationships, and because she just gets herself into trouble a lot. And she has no real support network. We just get a glimpse of her relationship with her parents. It's a bit difficult. Her mother is never available, and her father is married to a woman that doesn't like her. So she's quite isolated. She doesn't have a support network. But I was really interested in her because I like characters who kind of don't quite fit in the world. And she's one of those. She's really interesting in that the way she appears is very at odds with how she really is. And people judge her very harshly. And she feels that very much. So she's quite vulnerable and quite tender. And so the other character that you mentioned is Irene, who's 80, and she's widowed now. So she's on her own. She's living in a little house that she's lived in forever. And sometimes, I mean, she's she's sharp, she's great, but every now and again, if she lets herself get run down or doesn't eat properly, she can get a bit confused. And it's when she's in one of these confused states that she and Laura cross paths, and Laura is very kind and helps her. But Irene kind of came to me. I was wandering back. I was back from the shops, actually not maybe a restaurant. I can't remember where it was. It was a while ago with my partner, and we were walking down this little lane, and there was an old lady outside her house, and she asked my partner if he would come into the house and change a light bulb for her, which she did. But I was just thinking that was quite sad that she was just standing out there waiting for someone to help. So there's an encounter between Irene and Laura the first time they meet, which is not the same, but sort of is inspired by that. But I really like the idea of there being this friendship that spans generations, and writing about characters who aren't necessarily what you might expect them to be at that age, or who maybe behave a bit differently to the sort of the cliche of say the little old lady. Because I think in fiction, old people are often written in a very uniform way. They're just, they don't have much agency. They don't have much. They're not expected to have desires and hopes and dreams for the future. They're just expected to be looking backwards all the time. And I think that's rather unfair.
Or even totally disregarded, because we don't get to see many old people in thrillers nowadays. And I read a lot of them. So I loved Irene. She's, along with Rachel, one of my favorite characters of your books. So do you see yourself or part of you in any of your characters in A Slow Fire Burning?
I think I see myself in, a little bit of myself probably in all of them. And every character you write, you have to have something, well, certainly something that you relate to and something you can sort of hang on to. Because often, the characters are doing things that aren't very nice, or they're behaving in ways that seem extreme or not very rational. But so you have to have something which sort of grounds them and which you link yourself to. And there is a loneliness and a vulnerability in a lot of them, which is not something I feel now, but something I have felt, and I can kind of draw on that on times in your life when you felt that you don't fit and you're not right, and because that's one of the things that all the characters seem to have. They are often outsiders. They don't quite fit. They're not meeting the expectations of society or family or whoever. So that's something that I can definitely. As I say, it's not me now, but it maybe was me 20 years ago or something.
Your writing plays with the reader's perceptions and the voice of unreliable narrators. How does The Slow Fire Burning differ from the other novels in that respect?
Well, most of the narration, obviously all of the narration in The Girl on the Train, and most of it in A Slow Fire Burning was first person. Here it's all a third person narration. We do sort of inhabit somebody else's head, but it's close to third person narration. So you don't have that very direct access to people's thoughts, which I think gives you a little bit of distance, and which is useful to me in this novel. I guess that would be the main way in which the sort of the exposition of the characters works slightly differently. Is in that slightly different narration, which gives you distance. It allows you to shape their narrative slightly differently.
I see. I'd like to ask you something now. You gave an interview in which you said, if you don't mind, I'll be quoting. You said, "Is there too much violence against women in crime novels? Almost certainly. Given how much violence against women there is in the real world, wouldn't it be odd if crime writers neglected to address it? I think so." And I agree. A good deal of our favorite crime writers and many of our favorite TV shows nowadays write and talk about crimes committed towards women. But this novel brings us a crime committed against a man and not a woman. And we can also find women's revenge in The Girl on the Train. Could this represent a wind of change or even a statement, however unconscious?
Well, I think, I'm very conscious of the way that violence is depicted in crime novels, violence against anyone, but particularly, I guess, violence against women. In none of my novels do I particularly dwell on the act of violence itself anyway. It tends to be something that often comes out of temper or a moment of and it's a sort of slightly insane moment, a crazy moment where somebody is angry or frightened or what have you, which is, I think, often the way real violence does happen. It's not. It's generally something that isn't particularly premeditated. It's people losing control. I'm not a fan of sort of extended scenes of torture or showing. It's just become a cliche. Having a terrified woman running from a predator at the beginning of something, or just a beautiful naked dead body, and we never even know her, and she's not really that important. She's a puzzle to be solved, and that seems very dismissive and not particularly interesting. Since what I'm really interested in is the psychology of crime and criminals, and what leads us to this point that we're doing terrible things. That's not the most interesting part to me. Yes, in this book, the main victim is a young man. I don't think that's not necessarily such a statement, but I was thinking about the way these things are depicted a lot, and thinking about the way we talk about victims, and we need to be a bit more thoughtful about those kinds of things, I think, about the way we write about these kinds of things, and ask ourselves sometimes, does it always have to be a woman, particularly a young woman?
Exactly.
Because actually, if you look at, statistics, the crime statistics, young men are far more likely to be victims of crime than young women are. However, I think the sorts of crimes that interest us tend to be either domestic or sort of serial killers and whatnot. Somebody having a fight outside a pub isn't that interesting. But so I think that there are lots of reasons that we look at it this way, and I think we need to sort of interrogate those reasons and ask ourselves questions about why. I'm not saying, as I said in that interview, I'm not saying you shouldn't have ever depict violence against women, because that would be really weird. It's a big problem in most societies. It really is. So let's not pretend it's not there, but let's be careful about how we write about it.
Yeah, there's a duty behind it, right? A
Yeah.
responsibility.
Absolutely.
Thinking that mental illness and neurodiversity play a major role in your novels. What keeps you coming back to these themes?
Oh, that's interesting, because I know it certainly has a big role in this novel. I think it's that thing I was talking about people who feel that they don't quite fit, or that they are judged often quite harshly, and that is the sort of things that happens to neurodiverse people. People don't understand them immediately, and therefore make very harsh judgments. That idea of feeling an outsider, or feeling that people are looking at you a certain way and thinking certain things about you, is very much at the heart of what I write about, and that sense of sort of being alienated from the world you're living in, which is, I'm not saying something that happens to all disabled or neurodiverse people, but it can be a feeling that you get from that sort of judgment. Obviously, in The Girl on the Train, I guess it was Rachel's alcoholism that made her that kind of person, and then also, I guess, her depression. But yes, it's another facet of that sort of outsider feeling that I tend to write about.
And also, I think that would you say sometimes you use your characters also to explore people's most hidden and uncomfortable sides? Because we all have them, right? We just don't talk about them. And you explore that a lot in your novels. With Rachel and Laura, and even Miriam. She's not pleasant to see and to hear, and her choices and her attitudes, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're all people who've, particularly Rachel and Miriam, if you talk about them, they're all people who have quite a high level of self-loathing. They don't like themselves, and we are privy to their thoughts about themselves and about others. They're both, particularly Miriam, is very bitter. And when you meet her, you might be sort of repelled by her, and that's kind of the point. But then we discover that something awful happened to Miriam, and she has never been able to recover from this. And it's the most interesting part for me is what it did to her, how it made her feel about herself and her own actions, so that she has become bitter and vengeful, and she turns her wrath, her rage on various people. They may not always be the right target for her anger, but she has to put her anger somewhere because she feels very powerless. She feels like everything has been taken from her and she wants to get something back. She has to sort of regain some sense of control. So she's a very dark character, actually.
She has a very strong need to feel the power, and understandably. This is a quote from A Slow Fire Burning. Carla sat on the window seat with her knees pulled up under her chin. Theo's bathrobe, pilfered from the Belle Rive Hotel in Juan-les-Pins a lifetime ago, gathered loosely around her. Do you take people and experiences of your life into your novels? Not this example in particular, but overall.
Yes, I had stayed at the Hotel Belle Rive in Juan-les-Pins, but I didn't steal a bathroom. I just remember that. It's a gorgeous hotel. Yeah, I do. There are little bits of experiences, situations, places I've been that you'll stick in there. Often if I mention someone going on holiday somewhere, it's somewhere I've been on holiday. There's a scene, it's a sort of a scene told in flashback where Miriam and her friend get in a car. They hitchhike and they get in a car with a man. And I did that when I was young. A friend of mine and I were hitchhiking and got into a car with somebody, and I was immediately very frightened. Nothing bad happened, but I immediately thought, we shouldn't have done this. I had a bad feeling the second I got in the car. And then nothing happened. He dropped us off and we were fine. But you take that feeling that I had there, that feeling of, we shouldn't be here because something bad could happen to us. So I think it's a very natural writer's thing to do, is to collect various bits from your experiences and then imagine what if that had gone a different way? What if it hadn't all just been a completely boring day out? What if something, a dark turn had been taken there?
That is very interesting. Yes, we have a few questions from our fans that they would love to ask you, if you wouldn't mind.
Of course.
So they were made especially for this event. So the first one is from Diana. Which book did you enjoy reading the most?
Reading?
Yes.
Hi, Diana. That's a very good question, and I find it quite difficult to answer because there's so many I love, and I think my view sort of changes from day to day. But I will say today, When Will There Be Good News by Kate Atkinson.
Inês Gonçalves is asking, what makes your new book a must-read?
Oh, that's a hard question.
It's a hard question.
I think I hope it's a really good combination of a cracking plot line with really good characters. So you've got the excitement of the thriller, but you've also got some characters who will stay in your mind and you'll really remember them. And I hope we'll really have affection for some of them.
This one is from Tiago. Do you ever feel that sometimes your characters end up writing the story themselves?
No, I think I'm always in control. But there is certainly there's lots of things that I don't know at the beginning. So I'll know I know where the story's got to end up. I need to know who the killer is and why they killed somebody. But everything else, pretty much, a lot of it I leave to develop. So then it all becomes just a question of getting into the story and thinking about these characters. And I guess to some degree you start to wonder what they would do in different situations. I do think I'm in control, but they do change a lot while I'm writing them. I think we talked about Miriam. She's one of the ones that she became quite a lot darker as the writing of the novel went on. She didn't start out quite so dark. And that was very much the case with Anna in The Girl on the Train as well. She was a much more sort of, she was a less dark character when I started writing her. And she ends up in a place I wouldn't trust Anna at all, But that wasn't something that I intended. It was just something that kind of suggested itself to me as I was writing.
Joanna, if you could have anyone playing Laura and Irene in a movie, who would your dream cast be? If you can answer this.
I can't answer this. And I'll explain why. And it's because if I answer and then later a film is made and they cast someone different, then journalists will come back to me and go, oh, you must be really disappointed because they've chosen the wrong person. So what I would say to fans, please do suggest people to me. I'm on Instagram. Give me your suggestions and I will happily take them. But I must never say anything.
This is a good appeal. Inês Martins, can you describe your typical writing day routine? Do you have one?
Yeah, it's not very exciting, but I tend to get up quite sort of about 7 and I'll go for a run or walk and then sit down at my desk and just write in the mornings, usually until maybe middle of the afternoon. And then by then I've run out of steam and then I'll read or, answer emails or whatever. But so the mornings are the time that I get the best writing done, definitely.
Maria, do the ideas flow or do you block sometimes? And what do you do to unblock?
I don't think I get blocked so much, but I do sometimes find that I've got an idea and I've started it, and then I get to a point where I realize that I have no idea where to go from here. So the idea is there, but I sort of write myself into a corner and then I can't get out of it. And I think that for me, the best thing to do when that happens is just to leave it, put it down, go away, go for a walk, read a book that you love, or read something that, reread one of your favorites. Just try and completely get it out of your head for a while. And then usually you find it comes back to you. I think you'll think of the solution. And if I really can't think of the solution, I'd probably ask my editor or my agent and say, what do I do? Because they're quite good at, sometimes you need somebody else's input.
That's good. And do you read while you're writing, or do you take a moment and stop reading?
No, I tend to read all the time. I find it very helpful to me. I think I would struggle to write if I wasn't also reading. I need lots of other influences in my head and lots of other, I just find it creatively really stimulating. I might not read a lot of crime fiction when I'm writing because you don't want to sort of read something that's too similar or what have you. So, but I'll read nonfiction, I read literary fiction, I read all sorts of things. I find it really important for me to keep me going.
So, when do you think, these were the questions of our fans, it's me asking, when do you think you'll be able to take a moment and sit down and write again? I know it's too soon, you're just
it is too soon.
Talking about a slow fire burning, but naturally we want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some ideas, I've got some things going around my head, and I'm hoping, well, I've been making notes and things. I haven't started writing properly, but I would have thought in the next month or so, I should be back at my desk, yeah.
I wasn't expecting to send that so soon. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you'll be seeing it very soon.
Any ideas that you could share at this point?
Oh, I'm not saying anything just yet because it's way too early. I have to be very careful.
Well, thank you, Paula, for being here with us today. It was amazing, and we wish you lots of success to your new book.
You.
It's absolutely brilliant, and we encourage all of our readers to buy it and read it as soon as possible because they will love it. Absolutely. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Great to chat to you. I wish I could actually be there with you.
Yes, I know, but you will be back soon, I hope.
Very soon.
E lá em casa, ou onde estiverem, obrigada a todos aqueles que nos acompanharam através da página de Facebook da FNAC Online. Foi um gosto estar aqui com Paula Hawkins, que esteve a falar connosco sobre o lançamento do seu novo livro, Um Fogo Lento, que recomendamos, em absoluto. É um livro fantástico. Paula está cada vez melhor, cresce com cada livro. Este livro traz muitas novidades criativas e encorajamos todos os leitores a lerem, todos aqueles que gostam da Paula e mesmo todos aqueles que não a conhecem podem perfeitamente começar por Um Fogo Lento porque começarão muito bem. Muito obrigada. Boa tarde.